Here with OMNE Chiropractic, I am joined by Coach Gannon of Creighton Cross-Country. We're going to be talking about programming for the runner. This is part of a running series that I will be doing. So thanks for joining me, Coach. You kind of have this unique background, coached at multiple different levels, not necessarily a distance runner yourself. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jace. Appreciate you having me on. Enjoyed getting to know you in the past couple of years, especially working together with a few athletes and stuff. And that's one of the things I really appreciated about your approach to everything. First and foremost is having a big picture approach to things. And I think you and I have already learned a lot from each other. And I think that's awesome to see that from your perspective. And it helps me. And hopefully we can provide some information to a few other people here as well. So, yeah, my background definitely unique. I was not a distance runner. I still don't consider myself a distance runner. I've done half Ironman, and marathon, and multiple countless half marathons. But my background was all sprints and jumps. And as an athlete, and my first college coaching job was sprints and jumps, and that's what I knew. And I was pretty good at it. I would have to say. I mean, at the NCAA Regional Athlete of the Year, multiple All-Americans. But that perspective and that concept of having to understand biomechanics and understanding how the human body works at a finite level, I feel like, is what has probably helped me as I transition to a distance coach. I think that a lot of distance coaches never had the opportunity to learn those things, or never took the time to maybe fully digest some of that information. But when you're working with sprints and jumps, that's what we spend 95% of our time on, because that's what matters. And then, yeah, like you said, I have my master's in human performance. I actually got burnout on coaching at the college level and decided to take a break from it. Took a job in fitness, moved to Omaha. Missed coaching, so I got a job at a local high school. My first job here in the area was at Gross. The only event group they had available was distance. And I was like, well, I've got a master's degree in human performance. I'm a complete dork about exercise science. We should be able to figure out how to coach some distance runners. And I absolutely just fell in love with it. To me, coaching distance athlete is just applied science. Obviously, there's other pieces that go into, working with motivating athletes and getting them to connect with those things. But understanding heart rate and training loads and volumes and intensities and what's going on in the body by stimulus that we create from different workouts and running, I just fell in love with it immediately. But the unique part is that I was then also able to go back to the biomechanical stuff and work with my athletes on form, posture, technique, foot strike, those things, which I think is one of the things that helped deliver some of the success we've had over the past, almost 15 years now, coaching in the area and in the distance groups. So.
Yeah, I think that's interesting how you said coaching distance runners is like, it's kind of obvious for you, right? It's just applied science. So taking this background that you had and like this human performance, and then bringing in your insight as like a sprinter or a jumper, like being able to just like kind of create force. Now, like, can you do that over an extended period of time? So we were kind of talking in our pre-show, just kind of what we wanted to touch on and what I see in the clinic and what Chris sees at both the college level, and then how we can potentially apply that to more of a amateur or recreational runner. So what are some of the biggest pitfalls you see with runners in their training, whether it's at the collegiate level and how that might kind of filter down? Because a lot of times, and I do the same thing, like I treat Creighton athletes as well, but I also treat general population Medicare patients. And how does those principles, I guess you could say, kind of apply to everyone? So what are the biggest pitfalls that you see with runners in their training?
For sure, the biggest one I think I see a lot of times is that for the person who's just getting into, I'm going to go run, whether that's their first half marathon or their first marathon or those things, I see people either overtrained or undertrained. That's the biggest thing I see. Some people don't realize the work it takes to run 26.2 miles and not be laid up on a couch for a week after. And other people approach it so aggressively that by the time they get to race day, they're either broken or completely burned out or run out. Essentially, there's nothing left in the tank for them to have a good race. So one of the things that we talk about is, you know, if you are setting a goal to run a half marathon or a marathon, it's not something that you can take lightly. You need to be running, 4 to 6 days a week, probably, to be able to accomplish that. You need to be able to have some longer runs in there. But at the same time, if you're not a person who's been running and has a long background in running 7 days a week is going to put you over the edge. Your body is just not prepared for that. You don't have the systems in place for you to be able to continue that type of duration and sustained effort for a long period of time. Your body's going to break down. And I think that's probably where you see people, Jace, is after, they too much too fast, right?
Yeah, I would imagine you probably at your level have to kind of pull the reins back. I mean, at least the runners that we've kind of worked together with, it's kind of this pull the reins back where I see it kind of the other side. I have somebody, maybe they signed up for a half marathon or let's say half marathon, because that's kind of typical distance that a lot of my patients will run. They kind of signed up for this on a whim. They have a full-time job, they have a family. So then you get into I don't think people realize how many miles or how often you should be running if you want to be able to complete that successfully. So, I mean, obviously when I work with the Creighton athletes and with you, it's it's a little bit different. Hey, we got to kind of cool the system down. We might be I don't want to say overtraining, but when we're coming back from an injury, we can't just jump back into that program where we were. So it's kind of twofold. It's kind of two sides of the same coin. What I think is interesting, that book you recommended, so Hansen's Half Marathon, I got it. I mean, because I'm not a running coach, but I have to answer some of these questions. I like having you as this resource, but I was diving into this, and page 9, it has a chart of weekly mileage based on level and event, and I was shocked by it. Just how much, if you want to be a beginner and run a half marathon, you got to be hitting 30 to 40 miles per week. That seems crazy to me. I ran one half marathon. I am myself not a runner either, but I played a sport that involved a lot of running, so I kind of have some sort of baseline. But I think that's one of the things, I would say I was undertrained when I did my half, even though I had a background in running. It was something that I just wanted to check off my bucket list,
right.
Just run a distance. And then after I did, I was like, yeah, that's good. I don't ever want to do that again. But I think I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more if I could have carved out a little bit more time for training. It would have felt a little bit more enjoyable at the end.
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
That highlights the overtrained, undertrained. Even a former collegiate athlete, I would say I was undertrained. And I see patients that do a far less running, and that's why they're in my office, right, is because they go on one long run on a Saturday because that's the only time they have to do it. And then the rest of their week, they're just kind of hobbling along.
Yeah, for sure. And the book that you brought up, that I brought up to you a week ago, and then obviously you picked up already, the Hansen System, quite honestly, for anybody that's tuning into this, I personally believe it's one of the best approaches out there. If you don't have time or the resources to have a personal running coach, $13 or $14 from Amazon, and you get the Hansen's Half Marathon System or the Hansen's Full System. And it's a phenomenal book. I mean, I don't know how much you've had a chance to look at it, but the first third of the book is basically an introductory to running and exercise science, and it gives you just enough information to help you understand the concepts of the book. It talks about nutrition, it talks about rest, it talks about recovery, it talks about pace zones, it talks about how much we should be running, it talks about your goal paces, and it actually has programs in the back where you can, hey, this is what I'm currently running, these are my goals, this is how much time I have, like you said, to the dad who's working or the mom who's working, and this is a bucket list item. It lets them utilize some programming so they're not just pulling stuff out of a hat and just oh, I need to go run because I have to run 13 miles. It puts some why to the running and helps them get there, navigate that safely and smartly. But it's a great resource.
Yeah, I mean, I have it here because I kind of plan on checking it out to patients just as I get through it. Just, hey, look at this program. Kind of, we can, like you kind of talked about, is just reverse engineering a program. Hey, this is what I kind of hope to run These are kind of what the workouts kind of decide if you're a beginner, competitive, elite, blah, blah, blah. So talk to me a little bit about, because you mentioned like this 13 out of 14 or this 6 out of 7 rule you kind of use with some of your runners.
Yeah. So one of the things, you see the, like we said, the person who's undertrained, which I've been undertrained going into a race before. I'm not gonna lie, because you're working, you have a family, you've got all these things, and you only have so much time. But the other side of it is, you'll see, even before I'm at Creighton and stuff, when I was working with a general clientele population in the Omaha area, is the person who's like, oh, I'm gonna go do this, and they just start running every day, right? And that, if it's somebody who doesn't have a running history, that's not ideal either. Their biomechanics might not be good. They might, just be overdoing it. Oh, yeah, I ran 3 miles yesterday, and so I'm going to go 6 miles today, and I'm going to go 9 this weekend. Well, that type of progression is not smart either. So we have, in general, I've always had a rule, and we have it with our athletes here. We have a 13 out of 14 rule, which is 1 out of every 14 days, our athletes have to take a full day off from running. So the most they can run is 13 out of 14 days. And it just allows your body to have a reset day. Your body needs time down. It needs time to recover. It needs time to reduce inflammation. It needs time to take a break and heal. Most of our athletes run 6 out of 7. They might cross train on that 7th day. They might swim, they might bike, they might yoga. Those are all things we encourage. But just to take a day off from running, I think, is important. One of the things that's common, or you'll see, is run streaks.
We kind of talked a little bit about run streaks. We see those people in our office. I'll just tell you that.
Yeah. So like, I have a friend, and their running streak, I think it's past 10 years at this point. Which is absurd. And part of me is like, man, that's awesome. And part of me, from the science side of it, is like, that's so bad for your health. Because at some point in the past 10 years, there had to have been a day when your body needed a day off, and it was worse for you to run than it was for you to continue running. Now, whether that mentally you needed to run that day or whatever that reason is, I suppose some of those considerations can come into play as well. But especially for the untrained novice, a run streak is definitely not a good idea. And so one of the things that we talk about too, like I just mentioned, the wellness part of it, like the mental side of it, is we have something here at Creighton called Wellness Wednesdays. Wellness Wednesdays for us is it's middle of the week. A lot of our students obviously have tests, exams, things like that going on. But it's middle of the week for us, and it's between our 2 big workouts or getting ready to head into a race weekend. And so we don't actually have practice on Wednesdays. And our athletes have a day that they can just listen to their body. And kind of like we mentioned a minute ago, whether that's running or yoga or swimming, or some of the student athletes will still run on a Wednesday, and that's fine too. But nothing is defined on Wednesday. The goal of Wednesday is be active and listen to your body. And that's every week that we have that on Wednesdays. And then depending on who our athlete is, some of them see what is a Sunday version of that as well. Some of them do run on Sundays, and that's kind of up to them. And again, listening to their body as well. So.
Yeah, I think I put together this document. I actually adapted it from Chris Johnson. I don't know if he's kind of in the running world. He's a PT. I get a lot of my stuff from him. But he has 10 commandments for runners. And one of the commandments is a recovery run is an oxymoron for most recreational runners. Like, if you feel like you need a recovery run, it should probably just be a walk or like a lighter day, a wellness Wednesday, in your case. Cause like, once again, like, your runners may feel comfortable doing the 6 out of 7 or the 13 out of 14. If you're just kind of getting in, depending on where you're at in your running history, like maybe you require a little bit more than that. And so Chris Johnson, this 10 commandments that I think I wrote a blog post about. I'll have to check. Maybe I'll link it in the show notes, but it's basically a recovery run is an oxymoron, or that recovery run should just be a walk. Like, you did something, you kind of raised the heart rate a little bit, but the pounding and perhaps the stressing of the runner's biomechanics, not as much. So you kind of give yourself that rest day where you do something, but it doesn't go completely haywire for you.
Yeah, and for sure. The other thing go ahead. No, I think we're leading into the same thing here.
Yeah, we're leading into like this programming, right? Because, and you kind of talked about it with Wellness Wednesdays, like you had a quote when we were talking, is like, it doesn't matter how good the program is, if your sleep and your nutrition are poor. Like basically it's kind of like you can't outrun a bad diet or bad sleep. And like the more and more we learn how much important that fuel is for the runner, as well as like that sleep cycle. So what else are you doing that you've kind of implemented with Creighton? Obviously you have the Wellness Wednesdays, you have most of your Sundays are off. Like how do you structure your practices based off of the fact that you're working with student athletes?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So a lot of demands are on a student athlete, especially at Creighton. I mean, academically, Creighton's ridiculous. And then on top of that, my team is even more ridiculous. Like two falls ago, fall 2018, our men's and women's program had the highest combined GPA in the entire country. So
It's
I've
been
got
like that forever. It was like that when I was at Creighton. It's like cross country is always like the smartest. Cross country and tennis, it's always like the smartest kids are in those sports.
So my kids are high achieving people with a heavy class load and things like that on top of things already. And so we talk about that there has to be this balance, right? And we find balance in lots of ways. And so we talk about listening to your body. So our Wellness Wednesdays come into play. We talk about our Sundays. Hey, be smart today. Let Sunday be what you need to be to set you up for Monday. The same thing with Wellness Wednesdays. The goal of Wellness Wednesday and the goal of a recovery run, so you just mentioned recovery runs, Jace. The goal of a recovery run, it should be to recover. And so it needs to be as slow or as short as it needs to be. The goal of the recovery run is to set you up for the next workout. The goal of the recovery run is not to accomplish fitness. The goal of the recovery run is not to make you better. The goal of the recovery run is to give you a reset point. And that's one of the things I think we have to talk about with our athletes a lot, is that not every run is designed, or not every day of running is designed to bring out your best. And so we have to look at pace variation. We have to look at training volume and load. There are days that are designed just to get you to the next workout. We get better on our hard days. We don't get better on our easy days. Our easy days are there to get us to our hard days. Those are the days that we get better. But again, we have to talk about sleep. Are you getting enough sleep? Sleep is the most important thing we can be talking about when we talk about athlete performance, or even just human performance. It's when your brain resets. It's when your body resets. It's when your body reduces inflammation. It's when it releases chemicals such as testosterone and things like that help you recover and help your performance go to the next level. Mentally, it's when you basically clear your cookies. That happens when you sleep, and those things have to go on. And then fuel is the next part of that. A race car, if you got the nicest Ferrari or Porsche in the world, you're not just like putting random gas in it. It's not going to run well, right? You're putting the best in it. And so our bodies have to be treated the same way. Does that mean we have to eat perfect? Absolutely not. Like, I love ice cream and brownies, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but all things in moderation. And does ice cream and brownies work right before a run? No. And does it work right after a run? No, it doesn't work then either. And so especially when we're looking at how we're fueling heading into workouts and how we're fueling post workouts, those two pieces are really important. So especially like that first hour after and the hour leading into, to make sure that you set yourself up with the right carbs or the right proteins to recover and also to fuel yourself for the workout.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it, but that was the second thing that you talked about, like the biggest pitfalls is the lack of pace variation. You kind of brushed over it, but if we kind of circle back, talk to us a little bit about pace variation and the problems that you see with that.
Yeah, no, that's probably outside of the total volume running too much or too little. The biggest thing I'll see in a not high level runner is the community runner or the recreational runner is they don't have enough pace variation. So they end up in no man's land. They're not training hard enough most of the time to create the stimulus or adaptation to make themselves faster. And their easy days aren't light enough to give them true recovery benefits. And so they end up basically, if you think about a car, they're running in this yellow zone all the time. Like if you're looking at the tack on your car, like there's red, which is definitely not where you want to be driving. There's where you should be driving most of the time, 2,000 RPMs. And so most people, I feel like, unfortunately, run in this yellow zone, which isn't hard enough to create the stimulus of adaptation neuromuscularly or cardiovascularly to see big performance gains on what should be their hard days. And they're not running easy enough ever on what should be their recovery days. So basically they're just burning themselves out. When if they took some days or a couple days of the week and made those days really hard, pace, effort, variation there, they're going to see great stimulus and great gains. And then they take a couple days of the week, make them really light, really easy. They're going to see more benefit to those recovery days. And we kind of mentioned, just a minute ago, like there has to be different goals for each workout. The goal of the workout shouldn't be just for the run. I mean, there are days that you wake up, you're like, I just got to get the run in. But there should be the goal. Is my goal today to recover? Then I need to take it in such a way just to recover. And if you go to Kenya, which some of the greatest distance runners in the world, not exaggerating, but these guys are taking recovery runs at 8+ minutes a mile, 9+ minutes a mile. They show up, you know how serious the recovery day is in Kenya when a guy shows up wearing sweatpants and a hoodie and it's already 80 degrees. That means he's probably running 9 minutes a mile that day. And these are guys who are running 4:40-minute miles for 26 miles, right? Even within our team, our recovery runs, our female runners are not allowed to go any faster than 8 minutes, and our guys aren't allowed to go any faster than 7 minutes. And these guys and girls are people who are training and racing at much higher capacities than that. Yet the average recreational runners out there just every day clicking off 7:15 or 6:45 miles, and you don't see any pace variation. So that's where they reach these plateaus because they haven't created that stimulus or that recovery effect.
Yeah, it's like we kind of like back to the car. It's like I was telling you, it's like when you're just like accelerating to like get on to, let's say you're getting onto Dodge to keep up with the flow of traffic, but you never quite like punch it to like just go and then like be able to wind it down. Like you just kind of like, and you can feel it like when you drive your car, like that's like what a lot of runners are doing to their bodies. Like it just feels crappy, but they almost can't see the forest through the trees, and they just kind of beat their head against the wall. No pace variation, or like you said, they only run at race pace, and that's a big problem. Something kind of switching gears a little bit, but something that you pointed out is that you use minutes over miles to kind of work with your runners, and that's not something that it's kind of like in chiropractic. Like when I talk to other chiropractors, they try to gauge the health of my practice by patient visits a week, which is like kind of a crazy, stupid number. Or like if you're like in the personal training world, like how much do you bench press? Like, like it's kind of like just a terrible measure. And I feel like runners, like how many miles a week do you do? So like tell me a little bit, or tell the listener a little bit about like minutes over miles and why that's like useful.
Right. Yeah. So the first thing is I hate miles. Miles are dumb. Depending on which part of the world you're in, you're not even using miles, you're using kilometers, right? And so miles don't mean anything. Like it doesn't. It's a way of measurement. That's all it is. Mileage is just a tool for measurement. Same thing with kilometers or a metric system, whatever you want to use. It's just a tool for measurement. And it's an easy tool for measurement. That's why we get so locked into it. It's easy. Everybody can be like, oh, 5 miles. Everybody knows how far 5 miles is. Or 1 mile or 26 miles. Like it's common. But I hate using mileage. I hate using kilometers. Now, when we do speed work or track work, we'll use those references just because it's easy to think about those things. And when we race, we obviously race set distances. And so those principles are still important in some ways. But your body, your heart, your lungs, your legs, they have no idea what a mile is. They have no idea what a kilometer is. Your body knows how long you worked and how hard you worked. And so I've always used minutes, especially and that comes back to my exercise science background, right? Because that's not what if you look at exercise science, you don't sit here and be like, well, their volume and training load was based on miles. No, you look at it as based on time and what the heart rate was for a certain amount of time, or what the respiration was for a certain amount of time. And that's the only thing your body knows. And so when we use minutes or time, the other thing is it naturally differentiates how our body's feeling that day. And so if my body is feeling rough that day because I had a stressful day at work, or because I ran too many miles the day before and I didn't have any pace differentiation, or because I went out with my guy friends and had too many beverages the night before and my body's feeling rough. By running minutes, it allows me to run a little bit less that day on a bad day, and my body needs some extra recovery. So if I'm running, 8-minute pace and my goal is to run for 40 minutes, okay, there we go. But if I think to myself, oh, I've got to get to a certain number of miles, all of a sudden I've gotten 52 minutes. My body was just having a bad day. So that means I put my body out there for an extra 12 minutes when I didn't need that. That was actually harmful to my system, what my needs were in the day. On the flip side of that, if I'm having a really good day and my body's feeling great, it naturally differentiates that way as well. And so if things are just clicking off today and things are feeling good, instead of only getting in 5 miles at 8-minute pace, maybe I got in 6 miles at 7:45 pace. And that's great as well. So it's creating this natural differentiation by me allowing and listening to my body to have some of those pace variations and some of those things that we were just talking about a minute ago.
Yeah, that fluidity of the workout, to like not fixate on a number, just do the run based off of how the system feels. And that could be good if you're feeling really good, you end up obviously going a little bit further. Or on the flip side, like you feel not so great due to other stressors in your life, whether it's poor sleep, too many beverages, like we'll classify that under poor nutrition, to adapt those workouts accordingly. So one more question and then we'll end it. What is one of the biggest differences you kind of see between the high school runner, maybe the recreational runner that has the full-time job, or we'll call them, I like how you use the term community runner. I'm going to steal that because like, I don't want there's some high level community runners that I don't want to like insult them for calling them recreational runners. So community runners and then collegiate runners, like what are the biggest differences that you see? And even maybe highlight, like I remember we kind of talked about a little bit about recruiting and how you use some of those things you see in a high school runner where you have some ability to really kind of take that person to the next level.
Yeah, so I think the biggest from high school to collegiate runners, and I think that even for most of our freshmen here coming in, the biggest thing that they see differentially is the commitment level to it. That it's heavy. Like they went from being a high school student and going to class from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and having practice for hour 2 hours a day, right? And they think that coming to the college level, they only go to class for 3 hours a day, right? And practice is slated for 2 hours a day. But the biggest difference between the high school and the college runner, and I think it would help the community runner as well, is the little things that the college runner has to navigate. And that's the extra time on recovery and foam rolling and stretching and doing those little things, contrast, hot and cold things, stem, tens, things like that, drill work, form work, all of those little things make the big difference. So our athletes are allowed 20 hours of practice time a week, strength and conditioning, all of those things fall into that. But additionally, they're putting in a lot of additional time to take care of their bodies, to set up a one-on-one session, to break down biomechanics, to do those things. And that's the biggest difference that I think from the high school to the college runners, just the time commitment to be locked in and dialed in to do the right things. One of the things we do look at, like from a recruiting perspective, is volume and load. And I think that comes back to the community runner as well too, is finding the right balance of volume and load for your training age. So one of the things we talk about, someone could be 16 or 17 years old, but their training age could be a year or two because they didn't start running until their junior or senior of high school, or their training age could be just a couple of years behind their regular age. So when we're recruiting, we look at those things no differently than how you would, as me as a professional from a running side of things, would program or a community runner. How much have they trained? What's their volume history? What's their pace history? What's their workout history? And how we use that information to set up their program moving forward. And this is no different than if you were a financial planner for somebody. If somebody's been saving dollars their whole life, right? It's easier to say, all right, we're going to move this money here, move this money there. Your savings account is this. Or so if somebody walk into your office and they're 5 years from retirement and they haven't saved a penny, right? Like those are two completely different approaches, and they have to be. And so that's the same thing when we look at training each runner on a very individual basis. If they were running 20 miles a week in high school and accomplished X performances, we know we have a lot to work with, as far as their upside at the college level. If they're running 70 miles a week in high school and generating X performances, we probably don't have as much upside to continue. There are only so many stimulus that we can create, whether that's volume or training load or things like that. And I think the same thing back to the community runner, looking at their training progression. You can't just jump in and be at 70 miles a week. That's got to be a progress, and there has to be a plan and a progression to get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I see that. I see a lot of like retired athletes, so maybe a former college athlete that takes a significant amount of time off. Maybe it's due to starting a family or getting an advanced degree. They just don't have the time. And then when they do jump back in, they kind of jump back in at a level that they were at previously, that they have no longer earned necessarily the right to do that. Maybe they'll be able to progress a little bit faster, but kind of jumping back in. I always see them injured like that first few weeks. And then it's so discouraging, right? Because you're trying to get back into something healthy, a healthy habit. Maybe it's exercising or running in this case. And then you get injured right away in the first couple of weeks. And that's a big problem. So it comes down to programming. And I tell a lot of times I give patients exercises and stuff to work on, like you kind of said, drills and stuff to address maybe some of their inefficiencies. And I can have the greatest 30 minutes of treatment ever, but it's just like you can write the greatest program, so can I. But if you're not going to like put in the work necessarily on the outside, whether it's with foam rolling and exercise, it's all kind of for nothing, So I just wanted to highlight that and kind of to spin off that. What are some of the best references or resources that you see? I mean, obviously we've kind of talked about Hansen's method. This will be at my office for checkout, or you can just order it online yourself for, like you said, 13 or 14 bucks. They have the full, they have the half. We kind of talked about, it might not necessarily be for the community runner, but we talked about the growth equation. Like they just had a really cool article this last week that talked about, and it kind of falls into our pace variation talk about conversation and how like your ability to converse with your runs kind of tells you the level that you're at. And they use that, like obviously you need to have some easy runs where you could carry on a full conversation. And then you need to have some runs where you can hardly get out a few words because you're pushing it so hard. So I'll link that too in the show notes, but just basically like being able to adjust pace variation. What are some other resources that you like to give community runners, or even?
Yeah, no, the talk test, what you just mentioned by the growth equation there, that's a huge one, So if you're on an easy run, yeah, you should be able to talk and have a conversation. If you're on a moderate run, you should be able to speak approximately 1 to 2 sentences at a time without having to take a breath. And if you're on a hard run, you shouldn't be able to talk more than a word at a time. So that's a great resource to just simplify that on that side of things. Another one of my favorite books, and not just running related, but life performance related, is Peak Performance by Steve Magnus. Phenomenal book. It's great perspective on doing the little things, the right things day by day, to make yourself successful as possible in whatever aspect of life, whether that's running or professionally or being a parent even. There's stuff that I've taken out of that book that I use with my 2-year-old currently, because it talks about neurocognitive development and like how we have to create stimulus and stress, but then we also have to have a recovery period. And so it's kind of funny that I use this book to work with my 2-year-old on learning colors.
I kind of do that stuff too. I mean, I've had that book, I read it, and it's actually currently checked out. So I gave it to a patient that kind of kind of needed it, I think. So I gave it to them, but it's so weird how that kind of stuff, and we're both like kind of growth equation nerds, you know, like once we kind of chatted some more, we're kind of looking at the same stuff. So like this just easily flowed. But yeah, that's a great one. That Steve Magnus and then Brad Stuhlberg. What's his last name?
Yeah. Stuhlberg. Yeah.
Those guys are awesome.
Another one I really, really like, it's right here, Endure. This one, I wouldn't say it's as much as of a this is going to help me run faster book. This book, Alex Hutchinson wrote it. It one of the best books I've ever read when you're talking about unlocking your potential. So it kind of gets into the limits of the human body. I mean, how most of those limits are actually set by the mind, and how we are capable of so much more than we ever perceived or believed when we get, especially if we have the right stressors or the right instances put on our life, how we can overcome things, or how our train of thought magnifies or simplifies the equation we're in. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote the intro to this book. Malcolm Gladwell, great writer, but he's also a sub 4 minute miler.
Well, he's Jamaican.
What's that?
Malcolm Gladwell's Jamaican. I'm pretty sure. I think both of his parents are. Like, he has like a really crazy running background. Like you look at him and you would never assume that. Like, he's kind of this dorky looking guy.
So he went to school up in Canada for college. And so he's at an indoor race, and he actually, in his intro, he talks about the first time he broke 4 minutes, and he went through the first lap, and the guy reading off the lap split, whatever he said, like he said 58 or something like that, and Malcolm's like, "Oh man, that's the easiest 58 I've ever run in my life." He's like, "Oh, we're just gonna keep cranking on this," and so he just boom, 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 clicks away, and he runs sub 4 minutes for a mile. And it was like a 10-second PR. It was absolutely absurd. And they go after the race. He's talking to one of his buddies. He's like, "Man," he's like, "how you went through like in 63 for that first lap." And he's like, "What? I know they said 58." And so essentially, what happened is that whoever was reading splits read the split wrong. But mentally, that set Malcolm Gladwell up into like, "Wow, this is the easiest I've ever run this fast. I'm just going to keep hammering." As opposed to if he would have gone through and the guy actually would have read 58, Gladwell even says, "I don't know if I ever broke 4 in my life."
Yeah, that's
because
crazy.
It puts a different pressure and different perspective on that entire process. So great book. I've enjoyed reading it. It's one of those books you kind of go back to, you read pages over and over. There's stories.
We recommended it. I actually bought that one too. It's funny, we got off that phone call and I bought you that human locomotion book, like, "Hey, check this out. You're a biomechanics nerd too." And then I bought the Hansen method and Endure. So they're on my list, you know. I always got a few books that I need to get read, but just to kind of finish it off, where can people kind of stay in touch with you, find you? How do they, if they want more information or be in touch with you?
Yeah. So my Twitter handle is RunCoachG, RunCoachG. This is a great way to kind of potentially connect with me. I retweet stuff a lot or put some original content out as well. A lot of it being mental performance or rest recovery things. Obviously, people can email me at Creighton through the Go Creighton website. There's a lot of NCAA regulations and rules about whether or not I can apply to you based upon your age or the age of your children. But if I'm not able to, I can at least try to point people in the right direction.
Yeah, or they can touch base with me and I can kind of bounce ideas off of you. So I'm just going to annoy you through text message or something like, "Hey, I had another question."
As we figured out in the past 6 months, I'm a pretty big dork. I don't mind that at all.
I know. You kind of thrive on it. And you're like, "Oh, okay, perfect." All right, Chris. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward. I'll do a little write-up on this and kind of really hit the high spots and link back to some of the resources that we mentioned. So thanks so much for kind of sharing your time and your expertise. I really think this is valuable just it addresses the programming issue that so many runners kind of run into, pun intended, as far as the injuries. So thanks so much for joining me, and we will end on that. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Sweet, man. Appreciate it.